This is Tech Tuesday, where we shine the spotlight on a trending theme in the world of technology and gain a better understanding of where trends are leading in the world of tech investment. This is Tech Tuesday, presented by the Canadian Securities Exchange.
Thank you to everyone online for joining us live today for this week's edition of Tech Tuesday. Today's session talks all about retail management. It's presented to you by the Canadian Securities Exchange. We're pleased to have two companies. Joining us today will be Robert Galarza. He's the CEO of TruTrace Technologies Inc., followed by Rahul Kushwah, who's the CEO of DeepSpatial Inc. Joining them both today will be James Black as well as Barrington Miller as our guest moderators. And this represents today's lineup. Our objective in Tech Tuesday is twofold. First, for companies to gain visibility and traction on an accessible platform. The second is to inform capital markets players and investors about these types of companies in the tech space, while also providing new knowledge of what is happening in the world of nanotech. For you as attendees, we do ask that you share ideas, leads, possible funding, and feedback with our presenters. You may even have a potential strategic relationship. You can find their contact information in the profile box. With respect, we might refrain from giving management advice unless we are truly experts in the company's particular field, and don't treat our presenting companies as marketing targets for services. Some housekeeping matters. If images aren't clear or pictures are incomplete, please check your bandwidth, refresh your screen, call your IT, or try a different platform, as we're broadcasting from YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as AirMeet. Note our disclaimer. This presentation is for information only and is not solicitation to make an investment in either shares or debt or to buy or sell stock. CSE and the session host, which is myself, make no representation about any of these companies. If you are interested in the investor pitch, please connect with the companies directly in order to get detailed information. Each company today will have 7 minutes to present with their PowerPoint. After both companies have presented, we will then move on to the question and answer period. Today we have as presenters Robert Galarza, CEO of TruTrace Technologies Inc. As the CEO of TruTrace Technologies, which is the developer of the first integrated blockchain platform to register and track intellectual property for the global cannabis market, Mr. Galarza has over 10 years experience in advertising and mass media communications. Over 7 years of experience as a corporate transactional attorney, during which his practice included the representation of professional athletes in the entertainment industry, and over 8 years of experience in the digital technology, specifically focused on mobile platform development, software as a service solutions, and blockchain.
Thank you. Great to be here today. Robert Galarza, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of TruTrace Technologies. For those of the audience that may not be super familiar with us, we have been around since 2018. Really, in the beginning, we were focusing on looking at granularity of product data for the legalized cannabis industry, looking to really architect a system and help support a system to be able to understand the nuances of this particular narcotic and how it can connect into patients long-term. As over the past couple of years, as things have advanced, one of the other areas that we really shifted our focus to, I would say in 2020 and 2021, has been in the area of organic food, really taking the software itself, allowing ourselves to serve as a centralized hub for connectivity. So a manufacturer, a producer, an operator, an organic food company can come in and manage all their inventory, their company data, their documentation, their certifications. They can connect directly to certifying bodies, third-party certifying bodies, for being able to audit their particular company, to be able to maintain those certifications, and then being able to also then connect that into a broader and bigger story on product directly for the customers who are buying it. And then in addition to that, we have been deeply embedded in the blockchain space since inception. We were actually the first company to put genetic cannabis data on the blockchain, which is kind of a fun little tip of the cap. But really what that allowed us to do was really advance in understanding what the technology could provide long-term. And then what we're finding now is as we're seeing new advancements like non-fungible tokens or NFTs come to light, really looking at the utility of those, looking at the utility of smart contracts in the scope of supply chain. Again, specifically in our area, focusing on kind of the product side. What is the details of the products? What's actually happening? I always like to tell people that, product, like companies, it's all about a story. There's a story that's created from the beginning to the end. And what we're looking to do is serve as a system that can help support truth and trust and transparency throughout that story, and allowing ourselves to connect into other systems that provide other parts of the ecosystem, whether that be direct engagement with consumers, whether that be external third-party ERP systems, really being a collaborative system that sits in the middle and helps support and provide better value long-term for being able to, bring standards and practices and product verification, and really focusing, I think, in an area that's of significant need right now, which is trust.
Thank you, Robert, for that wonderful presentation. And again, it's always great to see you. I did have a couple questions, and this is the part of the program that we like to call the Inquisition. There's nothing going to be too intense, but we do want to delve a little bit deeper. You started out more on the cannabis slant, but you and your company have pivoted. Can you tell us exactly why and what some of the opportunities, at least tech-wise, from that pivot of less focus on cannabis and more into the food ecosystem?
So really, Barrington, when we first started this company, we were focusing on initially kind of the ideation of medical cannabis. I think what we've seen over the past couple of years, it's such a young industry, still trying to kind of find itself. We can all kind of admit that the rollout's been a little bit slower than we anticipated globally. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that the standards that you typically see in other industries just isn't quite there yet for the cannabis sector. But what we have found is that, when systems are a little bit more advanced, there is a much greater sense of need when it comes to reliability of data. So in the food space, in the apparel space, what we've started to see is really the shift towards companies that already have infrastructure in place for their the work that they're doing. But now we're seeing purpose-driven businesses kind of come to the forefront. People saying, hey, look, I want to make sure we're making a difference on how we manufacture, how we distribute, what kind of contribution we're making. Obviously, we all know the buzz term ESG and kind of what that means in terms of scoring related to how a company operates. But a lot of the companies that we've been really meeting with have said, hey, look, we want to make sure that people know that what we're claiming to be doing as a purpose-driven business is accurate and true. And the only way to be able to do that is to be able to have a data system and a series of data systems that can better support those claims. So the shift was kind of an organic one. It wasn't one that we said, hey, we don't want to be in the cannabis industry anymore. It was more one that it's kind of like, well, they're going to figure themselves out and we'll be there when they're ready at that time. In the meantime, we have a significant area of need opening up on the other side for that same level of transparency. And I would say a very warm, reception from these other industries as well for what we bring to the table.
Well, you mentioned organic, Robert. So is there a good example that people can put their mind around of a product that TruTrace is behind that is on store shelves today or on a digital storefront that has that label stuck on it that would show people that your process is behind this product and that they can trust it?
Yeah, so right now we're relatively early in the products that are actually out in market. We have a handful of functional beverages, some supplement companies that are starting to put us up online as well related to product. We also have a couple initiatives. Actually, one of the industries it's pretty intriguing is some of the early stage basically discoveries that we're finding in the salt space. It's not something people really think about, although it's in all of our food every day. And the safety behind those products is pretty critical. And unfortunately, global supply chain, when you look at it and the complexities of it, oftentimes one of the things is what are the dark spots for potential contaminants happening on foods that we're eating every single day. So that's definitely an area that we've put kind of in our crosshairs as a focus for 2022, and we've had some really good traction kind of unfold with that.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I'd never thought about salt. I mean,
people that usually don't.
I love it. Love it a little too much. Data is only as good as the quality that's going in. So I guess what I'm leaning towards is What is it that TruTrace is using as far as the data and data management, and what is it actually spitting out on the other end?
Yeah, great question. So, there's three different kind of functional data sets that we incorporate within the TruTrace infrastructure. One is company created data and documentation. So, who you are, where you are, what you're producing, what are the details on what you're producing, what are all the documentations that you use within your own SOPs. The second portion, which is much more reliable in terms of that independence, is being able to connect directly to third-party, audit bodies and third-party testing bodies. So one of the areas that we've always wanted to, make sure we lived in was, hey, look, we understand the products are your products, and when they get tested, the test results on your products are technically your test results, but the data associated with those tests needs to be independently managed through a third-party system. You can't trust manufacturers to just do the right thing on product. We just haven't seen that in any case in history where companies just consistently or always maintain that ethical line. I think probably pretty altruistic to think that it could be so. So really, we serve as that independent layer for aggregation of data from those third parties. And then corollary to that, we also send data back up the chain to these third-party certifying bodies. So we can talk to organizations that are providing certifications and audits for these different organizations. And the company, comes in and they provide all that data once. So the thing that's really also good about integrity is, some of it still has to be based upon trust, right? Manufacturer data still has to be based upon trust. But when you build a system such as ours, where we're utilizing, a blockchain or multiple blockchains to be able to validate and secure that data, it becomes much more difficult for a company to come in and completely fabricate exactly who they are and what they're doing, because that data is going to be living forever. And so as they make adjustments, you're going to be able to see, on chain what sort of adjustments are being made and why. And again, if we're talking to the bodies that they want to connect with, they're doing all these different certifications that are driving, product into retail. That's where the integrity can really be established.
Yeah, I'm gonna just take another angle with this business, which is you guys have a SaaS model, which I thought was really interesting because it's based on lab verification and testing standards, and that wasn't my first inclination. You being a SaaS, when I go to your pricing chart on your site, it looks like I'm buying, MailChimp or something, but I'm buying lab certification for products that end up on shelves. So just tell me a bit about how you constructed the business model for this, and maybe is it novel, or do you see other people in your space doing this, or is this something unique to you guys?
Yeah, I think for us, really, we understood where a system like this, as we start to aggregate into a larger marketplace, that's one of the other things we always discuss. We need to be able to be bringing value to manufacturers of all types and sizes, and to do so, you've got to put a price point that is reasonable. One of the things that we really looked at is, we know that big organizations, big companies, they are working with usually a multitude of software systems, and they have a massive technology infrastructure that's been invested into over the course of, X many years. We needed to be an additional kind of add-on that wouldn't really hit their bottom line too heavy, unless it was needing to be customized, or we needed to do unique offset components, which of course we have professional services fully built into our business model as well. But the other side of it too is we understood if we created that sticky price point that was reasonable, right? You can get in, you can get started for just a few $100s. Try this thing out, get your information on the chain, start taking your testing and certifications through the ecosystem, start communicating the product to your customers. Number one, people are more willing to kind of give you the try, right? Get you in. And then from there, as we continue to advance the technology, we can then be adding additional services that we can provide as a part of that, how we scale the business up from there.
So if I'm like a small batch producer of some item, like like you said, a beverage or organic food product, I can plug into your system, get verification, relatively short order without too much of a heavy, business influence on how I do that.
Yeah. Like literally, if you are a great example, if you're a manufacturer that just makes, 2 or 3 SKUs, right? Very small, our price point on like less than 5 SKUs, I think is $4.99 a month. So you're managing your inventory, and that's the other side too. a lot of organizations that are smaller, we've found that right now they're organizing their inventory through Excel spreadsheets, right? So they're just using base spreadsheets. They're not doing anything to kind of manage the company at a broader scale, and they're not really building their system to scale up beyond that. So what you can do is you're in for $4.99 a month, get started, starting to get your system in there, starting to manage your quality details, starting to communicate your products. But as you go from 3 SKUs to 15 SKUs to 30 SKUs to 3,000 SKUs, you're still running in the same system. The other thing on that note, we also understood that a lot of software offerings are seat-based, right? So as you grow and scale, you're like, oh man, my cost just went up, tenfold because I added 10 more people who I need to have access to this system. We decided to move away from the seat license component for now. We may adjust that in the future if a company has, over, 50 or 100 seats. But unless it's really impacting us from a bottom line perspective, for us, it's more of what we found is for us, we have separate support packages. So typically what happens is once you get more people, you're going to need more support, which we don't provide unless, you buy that as well. And so we have other ways to be able to kind of offset just the low price point.
Right. So it's based on per product, not per user, like Salesforce, which exactly. I totally understand is can get expensive when you add a few people. So yeah. All right.
Blockchain. Now, I guess some of our users might think that there is just a flat earth or blockchain where it's just one layer, but it's actually, and you brought this up, it's actually stacked. You have multiple on top of one another. I guess I just wanted to lean more into that on how that actually appears for TruTrace.
Yeah, the one thing that everyone has to understand is that very, very much like cannabis, but I would say even more so, this industry is incredibly young, right? So we're just learning the evolutions. I mean, when we first went down the route that we were taking, we looked at Ethereum and we went through the Hyperledger framework, and now we're really focusing on things like VeChain and some other blockchains that we're and Cardano and all these new blockchains that are coming online, or blockchains that have been around for a while, but we're seeing utilization of and utility. And the big questions comes down to, what's the function of the database? What sort of smart contracting options are there? NFT capabilities associated to it, if there's a utility for those capabilities, and then what are the gas fees associated to each transaction? I think that's the one thing that I think that people need to pay attention to when they're looking at blockchain, is this idea that hey, blockchain is the answer. Well, it may not be, because if you're utilizing let's say an Ethereum based blockchain, those gas fees are very high in terms of the transactions oftentimes. So if you're dealing with large monetary settlements, that's one thing. But if you're dealing with like microtransactions, you're paying sometimes upwards of $35 to $40 per transaction. It's just not reasonable. So that's the evolution of what we've seen. And so what we learned is that as a system that's not we don't ride on blockchain in terms of our standard operations, but we write to blockchain, right? We utilize blockchain for its best use. We enable a company to come in and turn on and off blockchain utilization as they need to through their system, literally by the flip of a switch in our integrations hub. And from that, it allows us to be able to also bring in multiple blockchains. So you could have a company coming in who says, hey, I'm really wanting to work with, Polygon, or I'm really wanting to work with, this particular chain because I see this value associated to it. If they're not in our integrations hub, we can very rapidly get them up to speed, build the API connections, and be able to communicate some, kind of multi-chain, as well as things like Hyperledger, which is it's not really that open blockchain. It's more of a permission system, which is really of use for some people. But there are some organizations that's like, no, this isn't really blockchain. We need an open decentralized ledger in order for it to be really classified as that.
Well, Robert, that was awesome, and thank you for taking the time. We're now going to move on to our next presenter as well, Dr. Rahul Kushwah from DeepSpatial. Robert, we will touch base very, very shortly. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And now we have Dr. Rahul Kushwah, CEO of DeepSpatial Inc. Rahul has been a big supporter of the Canadian Securities Exchange. We've hosted him on Tech Tuesday previously, and he has recently led the team at PredictMedix, developing AI technology to identify cannabis impairment.
Thanks, Anil, for the introduction. So today I'll be talking about what we are doing at DeepSpatial. and how DeepSpatial is really helping the retailers out there, especially in this COVID-19 landscape, considering that now it seems like we're really coming out of this pandemic. So when you look at DeepSpatial, we're really an outcome-driven artificial intelligence AI company. For us, the premise is about empowering organizations, whether it's government or retailers or enterprises, basically around making decisions. It's about bringing data and artificial intelligence together and making decisions that impact the outcome. It could be about optimization, it could be about increasing profits, it could be around supply chain, but basically for us, the two main verticals that we are heavily focused on are the retail sectors and along with that, the government sector. In the government segment, we are working primarily on the fronts of education, healthcare, and infrastructure. And that's where we have announced some quite significant partnerships. And there are some very prominent use cases that are being developed along with deployment of technologies. Similarly, on the retail front, we have announced some contracts and some major partnerships. And along with that, if you look at our team, we do have executives on our advisory board who come from entities like Starbucks, Google, and Microsoft. And that really allows us to get more of a holistic view in terms of what's happening in certain sector and certain segments, and where can we really bring out our AI-driven solutions to have a real impact. Now, if we just focus on the retail sector, and you look at the AI adoption in the retail sector, I mean, ever since the pandemic started, the adoption of AI has been growing pretty much at an exponential phase. So you look at 2018, I mean, the retailers in North America spent around $2 billion in terms of adopting AI solutions. But this year, that number is expected to balloon to somewhere between 7 to 8 billion. At the same time, you look at the actual metrics, the growth rate, just in the particular segment of AI adoption in retail, is at around 30 to 40% a year. And the reason is because with this COVID-19 landscape or this COVID-19 world that we are in, the retailers in particular have realized that whether it's about getting their goods into the retail store or getting it to the customers, I mean, there are a lot of hoops they have to go through, which are impacted by a lot of worldwide events. So let's say you're talking about supply chain optimization, you're talking about identification of new customers, you're talking about where should you be opening new stores or which stores you're going to be closing down. How is the traffic in the store being impacted? How you can improve it? What is the single biggest factor that's playing a role in terms of your own business? Well, that's where DeepSpatial truly comes into the picture. And that is what we're addressing with our AI-driven solutions. So when you look at our overall solutions, I mean, to put it in a very simple fashion, the areas that we are focused on are 5 of them to be more precise, especially in the retail sector. The first one is the geodemographic customer profiling. So what it means is, so let's say you're a major retailer working in many different geographies. It's about understanding how your customers are interacting with your product, and also understanding from a market analysis standpoint that where should you be targeting as far as those new geography goes. So in other words, where you should be expanding into. What does your customer base look like in specific geographies? And can you really take the understanding of that customer base and identify new geographies where you have a similar customer sets? Along with that, we're also providing a price recommendation solution. And what it really means is that this really turns your pricing into more of a dynamic pricing, because it's really about understanding that if you're selling a particular product in a particular market, what are the customers willing to pay for a similar product? And it's only once you have a clear understanding of that you can have some dynamic pricing going on. And it's all about bringing in more customers, and in particular, bringing in customers that are going to be buying that particular product. Along with that, we are also offering a brand sentiment monitoring solution. And this is where it's all about leveraging the power of social media and truly trying to get a better understanding of what people are saying about specific products. What are people saying about these specific brands? Like, what is it that you need to do to perhaps improve the brand image, or perhaps push your products harder in certain market segments? The other solution that we are offering is around market entry and expansion. So what we are doing is at DeepSpatial, we do have a lot of proprietary data sets, and we are applying a lot of geospatial artificial intelligence. And this is really going to help you optimize site selection and geo-marketing, and also perhaps identify that which are the stores that you should be shutting down where you don't really see any more potential. And that is particularly relevant in this COVID-19 landscape. Along with that, the next technology that we are offering to the retail sector is around the supply chain optimization. I mean, basically, we have these predictive algorithms that we have developed, which basically identifies that how, when, but perhaps more importantly, how are the overall trends that are changing when it comes to shipping of your specific goods? And what are the predictive insights that we can offer you that not only helps you save money, but also removes a lot of that redundant inventory that really piles up when you're talking about these large retailers. And when you look at it from a retailer's perspective, especially with the large retailers, I mean, a lot of these companies have been operational for decades. They have been amassing all this data that they have been sitting on. And that does play a key role when we are offering our solution to retailers. So basically, the way how our solution works is, I mean, of course, we get the business data from the retailers. Along with that, we have multiple proprietary data layers that we have developed. And along with that, we also use a lot of external data sets. All these different data sets are layered upon our proprietary artificial intelligence-driven algorithms. And that then leads to specific insights, which can focus on, let's say, predictive inventory, customer site selection, managing workforce, geo-targeted intelligence, and perhaps even price recommendation. So it's about training our AI algorithms on your specific business using the specific data that works for your business, and then layering it with multiple other data sets. And that's where we have had some tremendous success in terms of offering insights that have really, helped a lot of retailers out there in terms of optimizing their business. So again, I mean, just talking about on the backend front, because as I alluded to earlier, that DeepSpatial does have a lot of its own data layers that it layers into these AI algorithms. We currently have over 456 data layers that we are layering when we are offering these solutions to retailers. So basically, a lot of these data layers are proprietary to our company, and that's why the insights that you get at the end of the day, not only they have a very high rates of accuracy, but they're also having a great impact as far as the operation of the business goes. So the four specific cases where we have really proven our technology and really we have brought value to the client, they actually encompass four different areas in the retail side of things. The first one is around site recommendation for opening new stores. So we actually did one of our first projects with a major supermarket chain. And what we were able to do was, first and foremost, we were able to identify what was the most critical data set or most critical factor that was playing a role in leading to certain stores being successful versus other stores that were not successful. And then when we layered that on our AI algorithms and offered them insights, we were actually able to offer them over 2,000 locations where, which were essentially based on understanding that this is what works for your specific business. So really 2,000 locations where we knew that the customer would see a high success rate with opening stores. And with that, what we were able to do was the scouting time, which pertains to how long it takes for a retailer to go out in the market and find sites, we were actually able to reduce that to 3 days. And at the same time, we did our predictive inventory analysis, and we were able to save close to 10% for these retailers. But the key was our AI algorithms really got to a point where with over 90% accuracy, they could predict the sales in any given store. So basically, with this particular use case, we were actually able to play a very strong role in terms of optimizing the whole supermarket segment, in terms of giving them the information and giving them the insights that really played a role in spearheading the success of the specific supermarket chain. We also did a case study with actually one of the largest global beverage manufacturer, and this was more in the brand sentiment analysis. And what we were looking at was their price distribution in certain geographies compared to their competitors. Based on the insights we gave them, they were able to get a 30% increase in market share, which was, again, I mean, a measurable number. You just have to look at pre-DeepSpatial and post-DeepSpatial, and that was actually a significant impact that we were able to bring to the table for this major global conglomerate. At the same time, we did some work with one of the largest coffee chains on a global scale. And this is where they are actually in the process of using DeepSpatial's proprietary algorithms to do site selection for specific markets. At the same time, we are also helping them identify the specific inventory that they need to be carrying in these markets to really, I mean, increase their ticket size for customers that are coming in. Along with that, we also helped a major consumer packaged goods manufacturer, which is backed by a large private equity firm in the US. And we were really able to optimize their supply chain. We were able to identify that in which part of certain geographies they need to set up more distributors, and where in certain segments they have basically oversaturated the market. So overall, what we have are 4 very strong use cases where we were able to prove the utility of DeepSpatial in helping all these major retailers. So again, I mean, I'll just briefly go over in terms of what we are doing with specific retailers or with specific segments in the retail industry. So of course, we are helping in market entry and expansion. Basically, we are covering customer profiling, competition, providing market sentiment, understanding the size of the market. And we are actually getting it to a level of where we're talking about specific intersections. So it's not about just saying that, you know what, these are the insights for a city. No, what we're saying is you take the city, we can go down to specific intersections and basically have all these insights provided for the client. Along with that, we are also offering solutions along the lines of merchandising, where it's all about demand forecasting, basically what they should be, how much of what they should be carrying in different stores in a specific location. What are the kind of SKUs that they should be carrying more in one location over the other? And at the same time, basically what that leads to is we're talking about managing their whole inventory, because what we have found is that for any retailer, the management of that inventory cannot be universal even in one city, because what you have is certain pockets of the city, you'll have a higher demand for one product versus the other. And that's where the whole dynamic merchandising comes into the picture that we are offering to our clients. Along with that, we also have pricing optimization. And again, this is where I alluded to earlier. What we're essentially providing is a dynamic pricing that basically allows the retailer to price their products in certain markets based on what the customers are willing to pay for a product of similar utility. And at the same time, the other area that where we are providing some very strong solutions is the whole supply chain optimization. I mean, supply chain has been hit fairly hard because of COVID-19, along with the recent global events. And what we are able to do is we are essentially able to predict the impact of multiple variables and at the same time provide predictive insight in terms of what needs to be done to optimize supply chain in an active fashion. So overall, when you look at our product suite, I mean, it's really designed to empower retailers on every single facet that they work on to make sure they can maximize profits and overall they can maximize that return on investment. And that is the power that DeepSpatial is bringing to the table when it comes to the retail sector.
All right, thanks for that, Dr. Rahul. That was fascinating. It opened up a lot of questions. I'm joined here with Anil as well, obviously the host of today's session. We talked about retail solutions in this episode, and yours was a great foil for what we had earlier, which was basically verification of components for things that end up on the shelf or in a product on a website. In your case, you're actually helping retailers best determine their product mix and location to sell to customers, improve their margins, and obviously beat the competition. So my first question for you was, does I was thinking about Ray Kroc flying over towns in middle America and looking for church steeples. This is way next level. Is this a physical only solution, or is this also something online retailers could plug into and benefit from?
Even the online retailers can plug into it because the problems remain the same. I mean, when we refer to a storefront, it can be really a hard storefront, a brick and mortar store, or even an online store. because at the end of the day, it's a business, and the businesses in retail sector have a similar set of problems that we are addressing.
I'm going to jump in there, James, with a quick question. Dr. Rahul, I know your presentation focused on the solutions your technology is providing to the retail sector. What other verticals is this applicable to?
So again, I mean, when you look at AI, I mean, AI is really all data driven. And again, if you dig down deeper, basically what you're talking about is you have your algorithms and you have multiple data layers. The data layers can be from retail, it can be from healthcare, it can be from education. So one of the verticals where we are seeing some fabulous scope and really, I mean, a lot of penetration from our end is the government segment. In particular, the education front, the healthcare, and infrastructure. I mean, that is where we have announced some initial contracts, and based on the delivery that we are offering to our clients, what we are finding is that their excitement level has been going pretty bombastic. So the parallels that I can really draw is that what Palantir did back in the day for the defense sector, what we envision to do is basically do the same thing for the government sector, especially in education and healthcare, and also for the retail sector.
Now, you mentioned the algorithm, and obviously you can't describe how that all works here in a simple conversation with people like us. But and by people like us, I mean people who do not understand all that goes into that. But you said the data goes into in the algorithm will spit out a recommendation. To what degree does the human element still matter? Because you could be told that you should put a retail location here for your coffee shop, or you should put this product on this shelf next to these other products. And it might seem completely insane when you get that recommendation. And how much do you say, okay, that's the computer knows far better than human intuition? And at what point does the human have to be involved and say, okay, it actually doesn't make sense for that recommendation to be put into practice?
Yeah, so the crazy part that we are finding is that usually when we're talking about the human intervention, usually it's not right when it comes to a lot of these segments. So especially with some of the use cases that I talked about, I mean, initially when we had some of these recommendations, we were like, okay, that doesn't even make sense. But then when those recommendations were applied by the client, they're like, it made a difference. And we never thought that this was the single biggest factor that was playing a role in the success of their business, but it was.
Do you have an example of that by chance that you can share? Or
So one of the large retailers, for instance, I mean, of course, when you talk about retail, I mean, you're like, okay, it's all about foot traffic, right? Let's just open in places where there are a lot more people coming in. But what we actually found was for that specific retailer, it was the places of worship that made the biggest difference. The closer they were to a church, temple, or a mosque, the more successful the stores were. So it was not even about that this is an intersection where a lot of people pass by. No. Just try to open your store near the place of worship, and it's going to work. And you know what? That's what worked out for them.
Well, that's back to the Ray Kroc McDonald's flying over. That's really interesting. I'm going to ask one more question before I throw it back to Anil. But we're obviously looking at huge logistic monsters in this industry, both in Amazon and Walmart, 800-pound gorillas, I assume, in this business of supply chain logistics and retail. Where do you find yourself fitting in against them? Because obviously they're deeply vertically integrated, but are you trying to equip all the companies that are around them that are serving more niche markets, or do you eventually maybe want to be a solution for them as well? Because Palantir, as well as you mentioned that as an analog, that's they got some pretty big customers.
So we actually want to be more of a universal solution when it comes to this space. So basically, what's happening is, I mean, when you look at a retailer like Walmart or Amazon, I mean, they haven't been hurt by things like COVID-19 or other worldly events to the same extent as a lot of other retailers. So for them, I mean, they're like, okay, you know what? We can do steps A, B, and C to just perform things a lot better. But for a lot of other entities, that's not even an option. So the way how we are looking at it is it's all about empowering a lot of these customers that work with these major giants. And then it really moves up the ladder to a lot of these big corporations. And that's where, as I said, I mean, if you look at our advisory board, we actually got directors of Microsoft and Google on our team, which are really playing a very strategic role in terms of how we should scale up and how should we really pivot our solution to really try to turn this into a universal global solution.
Well said. So, Dr. Rahul, I want to actually ask you a quick question about the need for this technology in a supply constraint post-COVID world.
Mhm.
Where do you see this going?
Well, again, you just got to look at the world today, for instance. Just look at what's happening all over the world, right? So when you're talking about a solution, we're not talking about a static solution. This is really a dynamic solution. So think of it as more of a technology that an executive can use to make decisions. In the morning, you come into the office, you open the DeepSpatial platform. Based on everything that's happening out there, what you have are insights that same very day based on the live data feeds that actually has a direct impact on the business. So it's not about, we give you an insight today, it does not apply 48 hours later. What we're giving you today are the insights that are dependent on what's happening in the world around you now.
I don't know if you've been watching the car sector at all, but what would DeepSpatial recommend the car sector to do? Because I'm deeply conflicted as to if now's the right time to buy and if who's in charge here.
Well, again, of course, if you say what DeepSpatial would say, if that's the question, of course, I'm going to have my opinions as a human.
Yeah.
But I would prefer to detach those from DeepSpatial platform altogether. With DeepSpatial, what we are finding is at first we thought that perhaps there are going to be certain niche areas where we can have an upper hand. But as we are venturing more and more into the market, particularly, our VP of Business Development, Dev, back in the day, he was heading the sales division for some major multi-billion-dollar tech giants. So through him, what we are finding is that there is really more of a universal need for a solution, that it's not more of a niche technology. It is something that can be applied almost in every given setting. But we as a company have to be mindful that where those low-hanging fruits are, where we can quickly turn that into revenue and show that return on investment for our shareholders. That's being a business, that's our focus as well. So what we do know is that we can make a significant difference in the automotive sector. And what I can say is through some of our partners, we are in the process of identifying some very strong use cases where we can show that we make a difference and really have them published as case studies, which can be the launching pad for DeepSpatial to enter the automotive sector.
I actually do have a final question, and it was around the concerns everybody has right now around protecting data. So what security protocols does your company have in place to protect data that you're sourcing?
So on one end, you got the enterprise segment. On the other end, as I said, that we're also working with government clients. And when you're talking about the data at the government level, the kind of measures you need to have in place are phenomenal. So one of the things that we always allow for is that our solution does not need to be hosted virtually all the time. If you need a deployment on premise, we take care of that as well.
Well, Dr. Rahul, you've been a guest on Tech Tuesday previously. We're always happy to have you on to talk about the companies you're involved with. To everybody watching, you've been listening to Dr. Rahul Kushwah. He is the CEO of DeepSpatial Inc. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I'd like to thank our presenters and our guest moderators, both Robert Galarza, CEO of TruTrace Technologies Inc., and Dr. Rahul Kushwah, CEO of DeepSpatial Inc. Also, a big thank you to the people who have worked behind the scenes. Of course, Barrington Miller and James Black, and the founder and creator of Tech Tuesday, Mr. Mark Francis, along with Melissa Robertson, who's been helping out on the back end. Lastly, thank you to all of our attendees for taking a slice out of your day to learn and support the companies on Tech Tuesday. Go to the company website, learn more about them and their projects. If you have a lead for them, please do connect. Next Tuesday, join us again for another public company showcase. You won't want to miss it. Subscribe, click like on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And may you all have continued success in expanding your business. Thanks again for tuning in to Tech Tuesday.